Hi there, my name is Celine.
And my name is Tassine. Welcome to the Prescription for Progress podcast. We're two medical students passionate about the intersection of politics and medicine, exploring ways to advocate for our colleagues and patients. Each episode, we dive into the pressing healthcare policy issues, share stories from those navigating the political landscape, and discuss actionable steps to drive meaningful change. Together, we'll unpack the current events that are shaping healthcare access and outcomes and learn from experts in the field to find ways for people to get involved on the ground.
In today's episode, we would like to welcome State Representative Tristan Rader, who represents Cleveland's West Side and Lakewood. Representative Rader spearheaded Lakewood's 100% clean energy commitment, initiated the city's first climate action plan, and raised the minimum wage for city employees. He has also served as the Ohio Director for Solar United Neighbors. In this role, he empowered thousands of residents to adopt solar power, managed community solar programs, and worked to advance clean energy policies that benefit everyday Ohioans. Tristan, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you so much. Great to be on with you guys, and thank you for doing the show. What an important thing to have these ideas out there. So thanks for putting the time and energy into this.
Could you tell us a little bit about your journey into politics and what it's like navigating uh, the politics of a Republican majority state?
Sure. Yeah. So I got involved really heavily into politics through Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. That's really where I saw an individual who was really trying to make a difference. And one of the things he stood for was Medicare for all, a healthcare system that actually would benefit everybody and would take care of everybody in our country. And we can certainly afford it in the richest country on earth. And there's a lot of evidence to show that we could have a better system. So I went to work really hard for him. Actually, I ended up working for him, traveling the country with him. It was really fun. Went to the convention as well in 2016 and came back home and kind of answered the call to be the change I wanted to see in the world and ran for city council myself. And part of the reason I ran was because our city council had decided to close our community hospital here in Lakewood, Ohio. So I decided that that wasn't right, and at least some of the members of our council who voted for that should be held accountable, and we should be at any turn possible pushing for better public options, and so that's been very much a central tenet in why I got involved in the first place. So I was on city council 7 years, and then decided to run for state representative, and that's where I serve now for the last going on 4 months.
That is awesome. It's so interesting to see the journey. So in your case, you started off. So before all of this, I'm curious, was politics necessarily in the purview, or was it Bernie Sanders, his campaign that really pushed you to be like, all right, I need to.
I knew that government would be important and that, just studying. I went to Cleveland State, my alma mater, Levin College, and really understanding that government had played a huge role in pretty much taking care of the folks that cannot take care of themselves, whether you're elderly or disabled or children, single mothers. There's a lot of folks in our society who really need a lot of help, right? And I used to work for the Cleveland Food Bank too, so I saw very close up back then that there's a lot of failings, and the state wasn't doing what it should be. The state, the federal government, local entities to kind of fill in those gaps again, particularly in a rich nation like the United States, where we could certainly decide any moment to take care of these issues collectively. And we just haven't. So. I thought I wanted to be in government. I didn't think I wanted to be in politics. It just seemed too like rough and tumble for me. But um, I guess the path just kind of chose me. I looked for folks to run for city council in Lakewood, and I couldn't really find anybody. I knew how to do it, so I thought might as well throw my own hat in the ring. Again, like I said, be the change you want to see in the world. And the same thing for state rep. I felt like I had a lot to give, a lot to offer, and I wanted to be where the fight was. And right now, the fight is certainly at the state and federal level. We have a fairly run city government now here in Lakewood. So
Yeah, I think that line, the be the change you want to see in the world, is something that's really important. I was wondering what top three things you want to do to improve our communities.
yeah, that's a good question. Top three things I want to see to improve our communities. I think just broadly, one, two, and three we need to invest in where we want to make change. So what does that mean? Does it invest in more security, more military? Does it mean investing in police, or does it mean investing in mental health and healthcare and uh, the very vital services like housing and food stability? Um, you know, so that's having worked in government, even just being an individual, when we go to budget our own finances, we put our money where our mouth is, where our values are. So one of the things that representatives do, you see them on TV a lot, Congress people on TV, you hear about these big scary bills that are very bad, like getting rid of DEI in college and high schools, and anti-trans bills and stuff. Yeah, we're there fighting all that stuff, but really where the rubber meets the road is in our budgets. State of Ohio has a $110 billion budget. A lot of that is Medicaid, pass-through dollars. And we spend the vast majority of our time fighting for those services and fighting for our fair school funding formula to make sure that our schools are running. So for right now, top of mind for me, you have Medicaid because you have cuts coming from the federal government. And our job as state legislators is to protect folks and make sure these cuts don't impact as many people as we possibly can. And funding our public schools, which again is part of what the state does, a lot of what the state does. And then trying to move the ball forward on things like Medicare for All. We'll be introducing our Medicare for All bill here in April, which I'm excited about. It'll be a joint sponsor of Representative Grimm. And just kind of setting that tone, setting the value. Here's where we need to be. We know that we're not going to get there this year, but we know that if we keep putting this forward, at some point, they didn't think it was possible in Canada when that was one of the first countries that actually adopted a universal health care system until a province did it, and then the province it worked, and they expanded to the rest of the country. So it can be done. We just need to keep pushing that direction. So yeah, 1, 2, 3 is just budgeting our priorities and budgeting our values. Budgets are moral documents, so we have to really live up to that.
No, it seems like there you've dropped so many nuggets that I definitely want to pick back up on and loop towards. I think one of the things that, well, right now it seems that what you're discussing kind of pushes us towards evaluating Medicare for all. Can you tell us a little bit about the upcoming bill? And then perhaps we can, one of the things I'm curious about in Medicare for all and its implementation in your iteration, one, how do you foresee promoting such a bill in a state that is primarily leans in the opposite direction from Medicare for all politically?
Yeah. Um, Again, we just see it as a setting the course for the future, and to show people it's not scary, right? We can set what I believe to be reasonable taxes on the wealthiest and the wealthiest corporations we have here in this state, and we can use those proceeds, I think, very efficiently to essentially expand what would be like a Medicare type insurance program for everybody between the ages of 18 and 64. And it's not too, especially with Medicaid coming in and kind of filling a lot of gaps right now. If we were to maintain that Medicaid group, maintain the Medicare group, you're talking about half the state population. It's not as hard as you'd think, and the cost would not be borne by people making less than $500,000 a year. Really, I mean, this is gonna, and that's just, and that it's frankly because our state has gone so far the other direction, has rolled back taxes on the wealthiest for so long, there's a lot of capacity there. Capacity that shouldn't even affect whatsoever our productivity or GDP or force businesses out of Ohio. It would be to many, I think, corporations a nominal tax. So it's doable. Other places in the world do it. Ohio could be the first if we wanted to be. Again, acknowledging the realities that we have a majority Republican legislature, which will, obviously scoff at this idea. But we'll if we bring 1,000 folks to the Capitol to advocate for it, maybe the next time around we won't have as many scoffers.
Yeah, I'm really curious to dive a little bit into some of the nitty-gritty and some of the misconceptions, especially because now, we're chatting as healthcare and politics together, right? From our end, obviously, we see certain aspects. We love the idea of having more coverage for patients. So you topped on thing one that people would be concerned about with Medicare for all, funding. So Could you elaborate a little bit more on, so you said, to my understanding, so above 500,000 would have increased taxes, it seems. Corporate tax and then a nominal tax you mentioned. Would there be any other changes required to implement Medicare for all?
I can send you the full document. Of course, you'd have to also, on top of, you have to fund it somehow. We're not, we're not hiding the fact that this will have to be funded through some version of taxing, whether that's increasing the VAT tax, which is a tax when products go from one stage of development to the other, taxing kind of like the difference and so you add cost when you develop something, when you have a product and it becomes more valuable through the process of people's labor, that should be taxed. There's also the idea of reinstituting the wealth tax. I think that's been looked at too here in the state. They call it the death tax. I don't care what you call it. It was a good tax system that allowed for nobody to really get hurt, and it was a super progressive tax system that allowed for wealth to be taxed in a way that allowed us to fund a lot of things in the state for a long time, until Republicans and conservatives got rid of it. So there's a lot of these things that have been left alone or have been gotten rid of here in the state of Ohio, which we could reinstitute to fund something like healthcare for all or Medicare for all or universal healthcare option, that would not affect anybody, like I said, under $500,000 or more. So, or less rather. There's a menu of things. Again, I can send you the work we've done on this so far. And it's something that's been introduced here in the state of Ohio before. My predecessor, Representative Skindle, introduced this last GA, as well as a few GAs before that. And we're actually doing this with a bunch of other states. We're coordinating with, I think, a dozen other states across the United States that are going to be introducing similar pieces of legislation, as well as supporting what's being done at the federal level to introduce similar legislation there. So yeah, all this to say, there's a lot of folks that do support these ideas. It's a misnomer that this is some kind of like radical idea. Again, the rest of the developed world has some type of universal health care. America just seems to think it's too far, and it's just not. It's reachable if we want to reach it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that in a country as developed as the United States, healthcare is seen or rather politicized to be a privilege rather than a basic human right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So something that I was really interested in is one of the things that you ran on was environmental justice. And as all three of us know, that really ties into healthcare and healthcare access. So for our listeners that aren't familiar with environmental justice, could you please just talk about what that means to you?
Yeah, so environmental justice, I think it goes beyond like a clean energy transition, goes beyond like air, water quality. It incorporates those things. But what environmental justice means to me, and I think a lot of people, is that as we make those changes in our energy system and as we protect our environment, planet, we make sure that we center the folks who've been harmed historically the most and have benefited the least from transitions, whether it be industrialization or the tech boom. We know that Black, brown folks, immigrants, people who've moved to this country from other places have really been left out, and oftentimes end up being in communities that are harmed by climate change. Here in Ohio, we have, dumping grounds on the east side of Cleveland where all kinds of environmental harm has been inflicted on people that just haven't had the ability to advocate for their own neighborhoods, and their own clean drinking water and clean air to breathe. And that's where we end up putting our coal, fire, and gas plants, is in those neighborhoods. And it's just not fair. And so in a just transition, we're looking at all of those spaces. We're also looking at jobs too, making sure that when we close these plants down, there's a transition for that workforce. Because we don't want to leave anybody behind, regardless of race or class or economic status or job status. So it's much bigger than just let's put more solar panels on things and let's put more windmills in the ground. It's about making sure that no one's left behind.
And so, what are some of the concrete steps that you can take to applying these thoughts and principles into action that can help restore these communities, revitalize them, or give a launch pad to the people who may be hurt in this transition otherwise?
Yeah, it's interesting being in the minority, being in the minority in the state house. I am myself not a minority, but a Democrat in Ohio. You consider that a But we are in the minority, so it kind of makes it a little bit difficult to actualize some of those loftier principles. But we can do it. And one way we're actually doing it now, working on a couple pieces of legislation that have to do with energy, and they're bipartisan. And they do leave the door open for all types of energy generation, but they also include some targeting brownfields, for instance, in our state, and incentivizing development of energy on those brownfields. So rather than putting a gas plant in a neighborhood, why don't we incentivize developers to go to places that are already landfills and, cover them, remediate them, put the solar panels on those, and the state will give you a tax break for doing that, essentially. So it's a good way to both encourage renewable energy. It's a good way to make sure that we're siting this stuff in places that make more sense than we have in the past. And it's a way to kind of do it without even having to touch those third rails of uh, diversity, equity, inclusion, the things that you just can't talk about, unfortunately. And it's silly that you can't talk about it because it's, just part of what we do, but it's been sort of demonized on the right, unfortunately. So you got to figure out ways to do it that just kind of skate around that. Um, what else? Also, incentivizing community solar projects. That's something that we got built into this bill, something I worked on for a very, very, very long time professionally. I was trying to get a community solar program started here in the state. Be pretty cool. It would mean that we could put solar on schools and parking lots, and then people could like subscribe to those arrays. People that don't have maybe the capital or capacity to put solar on their roofs. If you're a renter, you could subscribe and still receive the benefits, the cost savings of solar without having to own it and having to make that big investment putting it on your roof. So that's something that's actually in this bill that we could potentially pass here as early as next week. So I'm pretty excited about it.
That sounds amazing. What's the name of the bill? Just so,
House Bill 15, and there's also a Senate Bill 2. Senate Bill 2 has like energy efficiency in it. Our bill doesn't. House Bill 15 has it's called Community Energy Program in it. It's not an SB2. So we're going to have to like merge these two bills because they're two very, very big bills. That was a lot of good. It also repeals the very last bits of HB 6, the horrible bill the big scandal that happened here a few years ago where our sent our Speaker of the House to prison. He's still in prison, and the leader of our Power Siting Board and Public Utility Commission that are resigning and then killing himself. So a very, very like dirty $61 million bribery scandal that kind of broke and really, really, I think, decimated. And that's why the Ohio State House has one of the lowest, unfortunately, but earned lowest approval ratings of any state legislature because of all this utility corruption. So what this bill attempts to do is address some of the utility accountability aspects too, just really kind of changing the rate making process to make it more transparent, adding a lot of rules around how these projects can be set up and done, which we really appreciate. And I think both Republicans and Democrats have to acknowledge that there's a lot to do there. And I think we are, and we're going to do it.
Wait, could you walk us through a little bit? You dropped a lot with HB6 and its
Yeah, you
sequelae.
got to go
Walk
Google
us
it.
through a little bit like of the quick summary of what
Ugh,
happened, what
it's
on both
hard.
like the fraud end as well as the drama end there.
Yeah, it is crazy. I gave you some of the more dramatic bits, but that was kind of the. So basically, First Energy, which is the utility that if you live in Northeast Ohio, you likely have First Energy powering,
Yeah,
illuminating, powering
I
here.
think I've talked with their representatives before.
Yeah, so they said they got together with the soon-to-be Speaker of the House back in 2019 and said, "Hey, here's a ton of money, split it around," and they just literally flat out bribed legislators to pass what would be $1 billion subsidy bill for First Energy. So they gave the soon-to-be uh, chief regulator for the state $4 million right before he became the chief regulator, and they gave the governor, Governor DeWine, running for re-election, another couple $1 million to make sure that he got appointed and that he was good. So it's like the fox totally ruling the hen house, right? Like it's just total what we call utility or regulatory capture, meaning the utilities, the regulator have completely encapsulated and run the regulatory system that's supposed to be looking out for us, the ratepayers and the taxpayers. So that happened. The bill passed 51 to 49. It almost didn't pass, but they had just bribed enough legislators, Republicans and Democrats, and it was bipartisan, unfortunately. But after it passed, the news broke the next summer that it was done illegally. A bunch of people went to jail, including they arrested a bunch of lobbyists and the Speaker of the House, and they eventually arraigned the chief executive of First Energy, who's still awaiting trial. And one of the lobbyists ended up committing suicide, along with the chief regulator, Sam Randazzo. And then the speaker is now currently in jail, I think probably for the rest of his life, for perpetrating that the largest bribery scheme in Ohio history. And I think it's the largest bribery scheme in utility history as well in the state in the country. So we're recovering from that, right? So we're trying to figure out how, as a legislature, we set boundaries and we clear house, and we first and foremost get out of that utility regulatory capture space. So how do we make sure that the utility does not run the government that's supposed to be watching them? That's a little bit about what both of these bills are geared to do. The second thing that they're geared to do is just create more generation capacity in the state. We've got lots of lots of power needs coming on board, lots of demands like these data centers you keep hearing about, and Intel chip plants coming to Ohio. So we just have tons of things that will require energy. What does that do? It means that unless we provide more generation, bills are going to go up. We're going to start seeing really, really high energy costs. We have to make sure we can streamline processes so we can build wind, we can build solar, and of course, natural gas, all the other types of energy on down the line, because we're Ohio, we're not going to be, forcing too hard this transition. But we know when we allow a level playing field for renewables, that wind and solar can compete, and they can do much better than some of these other legacy technologies. So probably more than you asked for, but there you have it.
Yeah, this is really something interesting that I've noticed as well is so I think that with the transition to renewables peeling into the next steps, if you will, for
Sure.
Ohio, I've noticed that a lot of the leaders, a lot of the states that are really leading the charge here, actually are states that you wouldn't necessarily expect at first glance based on rhetoric from representatives, right? Like Iowa is currently 60% renewable energy. Texas is a bastion of wind and solar as well. Wind belt of Kansas, Oklahoma, North Carolina is also doing really well, but I haven't quite seen Ohio on these lists of states with surprising renewable energy. So how can we get on that list?
Yeah, and you haven't seen Indiana or Pennsylvania, and a lot of the reason you haven't seen this band is because of just the fracking industry, the gas industry, the oil industry, even the petroleum coal industries having so much power in the state, and then the utility is really running the roost until recently, until HB6, where they just had total control and dominance to the point where Ohio had banned wind and banned solar development for a long time. And now we're finally getting to a point where, just like the rest of the world, like Texas and other places, who just sort of like embraced this technology. And I think the lobbies too, for better or worse, of the solar lobby and the wind lobby are finally like, um, dollar for dollar able to compete in a lot of ways with some of these other lobbies. So finally, and the thing is, like, it's not political when you get down to the brass tacks of it. They're just energy sources, right? And if they can produce cheap energy, and if you couple solar with batteries, you've got a lot of good solid like wind. Um, I don't know what it's called. I'm not a wind expert. If there's enough wind to keep the turbines spinning, then why not just let it compete and let the winner win, right? That's capitalism, right? That's supposed to be free market economics that my colleagues all love to talk about and claim that that's the center of their like world and ethos. So in reality, it should there, you don't have to talk about the environment. You don't talk about greeny stuff that they don't like talking about. It can just be economic driven argument, and it works, and that's how Oklahoma is doing so well. And again, that's why we're getting some traction now and finally making some progress after so many years. Yeah, we're behind, way behind, as a state.
I think it is a huge step, though, that this bill is bipartisan, which is something we haven't really seen in Ohio for a really long time. I was just wondering what the rhetoric has been on both sides in regards to this bill.
Yeah, we as a party and as a sort of energy caucus or energy group have just tried to do our best to inform and stay quiet. Let the if things are moving forward, staying out of your own way is so. Though we've helped shape this, we're not here to really beat our chests about it. We're here to just let the conversation continue. And I think we're finally to a point where even Republicans are fed up with utilities, and we're finally seeing that kind of come to a head in the legislature. They've been pulling the strings for so long, and it's only created more higher rates, very complicated bills, and people are finally have had enough. So it's nice to see that at least there's some things we can still agree on, right? And still work towards. Of course, and I'll even say, you'll hear me say it if you look at the tapes, I'm for a full sail transition to renewable energy, but if we can get all of the above strategy done today, tomorrow will work for something better. And all of the above is a hell of a lot better than banning solar and wind. So that's what we're all sort of working towards right now.
I know that we mentioned this in the beginning of the podcast, but you helped commit Lakewood to 100% renewable energy by 2025. How's that going so far?
Yeah, the city is, I believe they reached that target when I was still on council through procurement of clean energy through, I think, NOPEC. NOPEC finally offered some clean energy packages. NOPEC is the council, North Ohio Council of Governments that does like energy purchasing through our energy choice aggregation programs. A lot of words. What it means is that cities can get together and they can aggregate their residents into like one buying group and then go buy power for them. So we've done that and we negotiated that with NOPAC. And right now they're providing, and they have contracts with NextEra, who owns lots of big solar arrays around the country where they can kind of pipe that energy in. The next step would be to actually develop local renewables. And we started that path too here in Lakewood, where we put solar on all of our city buildings, or most of them at least. And we started also on the energy efficiency front of reducing power by going all LED and all our street lights, and also electrification, doing a lot with EV charging infrastructure. So, we're making some progress there, but the next big step will be all green for all residents, and through what we call dark green energy or energy that's actually coming from the state of Ohio. And I hope that they can complete that by 2035. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, that is, I mean, for starters, congratulations on achieving that goal of having Lakewood City facilities on 100% clean energy. I think that's like when we were doing our research for the podcast, I'll be completely honest with you, we thought that was really ambitious. Um,
Yep.
and so we were impressed to see that. One thing that I'm curious about, and I think that this is where I think something that we've all learned through all of this, right, is at the end of the day, voters and community members care about their bottom dollar, right? How much does this cost? How much does this have fact me? Does this actually work? These are the top questions. And per our research, NOPEC has an estimate of about a 3% increase in cost compared to usual. So, theory versus practice, how much has it actually been? Has it been more or less? And how has the community responded to these changes?
Yeah, I think it is something like 3 cents, maybe, or maybe it's 3%. I don't remember which, but it certainly is. Not a lot. That I think we're asking our residents to pay for something that can kind of like help us transition to the future, which should ultimately be less expensive. I think if you go to Oklahoma or places that have like more of those resources in the state, you'll see much less of a cost, in fact, cost savings. And we see that too with community solar programs. 20 states have community solar programs, and all of them, I think, have some variation of a savings associated with them, whether it's a guaranteed savings in your bill or if it's like a combined bill and you just get cheaper energy because solar is just cheaper. So solar costs 3 cents per kilowatt hour and your regular 4.5 cents or whatever you know. So there's savings, but until we actually build in Ohio, until we're actually able to get the resources here, still it's going to cost a little bit more. And so that creates this like misnomer that renewable energy is more expensive. Well, yeah, it's more expensive when you're piping it in from, a million miles away through a giant, what we call them, regional operators of the grid or RTOs. So you're on this huge distribution network, and you have to pay for all those wires and upgrades, and then it gets to the distribution system, the First Energies, the Dukes, the AEPs. Then you got to pay that distribution charge, and that's how all energy is bought right now. But if you bring that energy close to home, which is really my like the future I see for clean energy would be a distributed, an equitable distributed energy system where everybody has the ability to access power that's made close to their home, and you avoid all those costs. So anyway, we'll get there. I think it'll be a little while. I think bills that we're working on, like HB 15, that has a community energy program built into it, are going to be a huge step to getting to that savings.
So it seems like there's, if you will, there's momentum towards getting to the point where renewable energy is actually cheaper. I'm curious to hear what is the overall capacity or promise for Ohio in the space of renewable energy? Like what looks most promising between solar or wind or other sources for the state? And can it get to the point where it's completely supplanted traditional energy and, as we talked about, cheaper?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can get there. I think there'll have to be some reliance on gas for the near term, especially in this political environment where it's just hard to argue for one type of energy over the other right now. But I think a combination. When we're listening to testimony, it just kind of reinforces what I've already understood to be true about energy. Like you can't have one thing totally, even if it's wind or something good, or solar with battery, which is good. You need a mix because there is some intermittence that comes along with any type of energy source, really. But especially with renewable energy, wind doesn't always blow, the sun's not always out. So, but you have to, by combining the wind, the solar, we have a nuclear base load in the state of Ohio. These plants probably need to be decommissioned here soon because they're getting long in the tooth, and the older they get, the more dangerous they get. But certainly looking at hydro as an option too, and where we can fit that in. So we mix all those different energy sources together. I think you get a pretty good clean mix of power. There's a lot of talk about these small nuclear reactors, but there's a lot to be known about that and to be understood about that before we know. We know that solar works, we know that wind works, and when you combine the two, you get a really solid product that can really sustain the grid.
So it sounds like all of these changes and all of this progress in Ohio is happening, and it's kind of in the background of all these changes happening in the EPA. I was wondering how these new EPA changes are impacting the conversation here in the state.
Um, if you look at my testimony so far in the budget committees that I'm on, you'll hear me asking about what these cuts mean to these different budgets, and you'll see DeWine's cabinet members kind of like, "Oh, we don't know," or "It's not going to be. We're not worried." Well, we don't know what we don't know, I think is the real answer. And until we see what's really going to be the thrust of this new administration when it comes to, environment, we're just going to wait and see. I think other places like Illinois and California that have really led the way on clean energy are a little bit more afraid because they've really relied on that partnership between the federal government and local to really make good progress. And I think that progress is under threat. Ohio, like we mentioned earlier, hasn't really made a lot of progress. And so our path forward is this like market-driven approach. Again, it's not the approach I've chosen. Don't think that like I'm advocating for this to be the fastest way or the way that's going to actually include everybody, right? But this is the path we've chosen. So it's not going to be really affected too much by what happens to federal level. We're not looking for subsidies. And one of the first questions that I got asked when I started was, how much subsidy does wind and solar need? And if we're going to get it done, if you add, I'm like, none. We don't need subsidies. We just need to be allowed to do it. If you allow us to build it, allow these developers to build it, it will compete with gas. You just can't ban it. And so we're working at rolling back some of those bans. So all that to say, Ohio's so far behind. it's not gonna it's not like gonna impact, I don't think, a hell of a lot. So we'll see. There will be some marginal impacts. We can get into like what happens if they roll back the fund that helps cap orphan gas wells, something like that. So there's all these like little programs. They're little compared to the bigger stuff, but they do make a huge impact. And there are a lot of changes coming to those like 10, 20, 30, 40, $100 million programs that we need to protect our air and protect our water, plug our gas wells, things like that. So we'll just have to wait and see.
I think you mentioned these bans on clean energy in Ohio several times throughout our discussion, and that's honestly something that took me by surprise. I wasn't aware of like direct bans on them. So could you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit more about what
Oh,
those look
that's
like and how long they were in effect for?
uh so it's just been really hard to permit solar in Ohio. But the big ban came in, I think, 20 not a few years ago, a handful of years ago, a couple GAs ago. Senate Bill 52 was passed, and that created this mechanism where counties could outright ban large solar projects that are over 50 megawatts, pretty big solar projects. So about half the state so far, or half the counties in the state so far have done that, have gone ahead and banned solar. So yeah, that's a straight like this. The state said, "Go, you deal with it, counties," and then these pretty much like AstroTurf, gas and oil industry funded organizations went to all these county commissions and said, "You need to ban solar," and they did. So the wind ban is little less direct, but it has the exact same effect as banning, and it's actually worse. They just created setbacks, wind setbacks that are so high that they made almost no viability to any of these wind projects. You need to put more than one wind turbine on a wind farm in order for it to work, and their setbacks are in the miles. So like, how on earth do you do it? And it just doesn't make these. They just had to make the rules in a way that would make it impossible to do that type of development, and they've done that. Um, but we got to work around in HB 15 that gets around some of the setback rules, not the current setback rules, but some of the grandfather setback rules, so we can repower, meaning we can retool the old existing wind plants in Ohio. So we're getting some small wins that we hope we can build on, and they might seem small too, but they're actually pretty big in the fact that this is the first positive movement we've had in the state legislature towards anything but gas and coal or nuclear in 20 years. So we're really happy that we're making some at least small steps in the right direction.
Yeah, that's honestly really, I find so a couple GAs ago, so you'd say these bans were put in like the late 2010s-ish or so? Like that, does that sound about?
Um,
I don't
yeah,
want
I
to
don't
put words in
know
your mouth. I just want to
when.
get a picture.
Yeah, you have to go look. Well, Senate Bill 52. So Senate Bill 52 passed, let me see, 2021. But before that, it was already very difficult to do solar projects in the state for a number of reasons. Just the permitting challenges. There's two different interconnecting processes you have to go through. And I'm actually on the power siting board. There's one rep that gets to sit on that, so I get to sit on that for us. And then there's also what's called the PJM queue. So you have these two queues that just takes a long time for these projects to go through. So for a long time, we have not had a very good regulatory regime on solar. But Senate Bill 52 really just was the nail in the coffin. Once we gave the power to counties to ban it, nobody wanted to even go to the counties that haven't banned it, because what if the county ends up banning it halfway through your 2, 3 year process that we have here in Ohio to get a project approved? So another thing that House Bill 15 does is it just streamlines that process for getting these solar and wind farms going, so that at least these companies know what to expect. It does the same thing for coal and does the same thing for gas. So it's agnostic to the type of energy that you're using. But we know that'll help attract all kinds of developers of energy projects, and that's a good thing. You want to be able to set the regulatory regime in a way where everybody can participate, it's transparent, but it's also predictable.
So it sounds like you basically have to work to it's so interesting hearing some of the rhetoric around renewable energy being like, oh, like, you mentioned earlier, right? Like how many subsidies will be needed, and you're telling people none.
Yeah.
Like what kind of boost will be needed? And it seems like, if I'm hearing correctly, it seems like Ohio needs to get back to a free market where it can
Yeah.
compete on even ground, let alone.
Yeah.
let alone needing an advantage.
Yeah. I think if you want to give these technologies an advantage, it just means you want to speed up the transition. If you just want to let the market, if you really want to like pull up the stop, just give a very fair, very predictable regulatory regime that treats every source of energy the same, and you'll see that transition happen naturally because these technologies don't rely on mining, don't rely on fracking, don't they the energy is falling from the sky, quite literally. I mean, and again, this is something behind closed doors. My Republican colleagues will love to talk about, love to think about, and love to like opine in a day when we could like have that free energy for everybody, right? It's a very almost Republican individual and rugged individual like mindset. Why don't you just generate your own power at home? You can do it. It's just you have to embrace these technologies and let the market figure out the rest. So we're making some progress, like I said, but yeah, it is interesting, right? How we have to kind of uh, term it.
Yeah, I think the phrasing of the argument's really interesting because when you try bringing up things like climate change or protecting our earth for our children, that immediately
Uh,
uh, halts conversation for a lot of
oh
these
yeah.
individuals. But when you frame it in a pro like market mindset,
Yeah.
it
Businesses
all
need energy
changes.
too, and I think my colleagues are more interested in businesses than people. Sometimes. So like just tell them, yeah, I mean, tell them the truth. The truth is businesses need energy too, and the business community is behind a lot of the push for the renewable transition because like who doesn't want cheap, predictable, energy prices?
Yeah, so I have a few follow-up thoughts too. So question one, and apologies if you addressed this. Um, Regarding these solar bans after Senate Bill 52, so how many counties have kept those bans? How and have you seen counties roll them back at all?
I don't think any counties rolled it back. Um, I can look up right now to see how many counties have banned solar, and then I'll let you know. But it's a good. I think we're pushing 50 of them, at least 26 so
Okay, so
far.
20, so roughly like
There's more
50.
than that. Early 2024, there was 26. There's been more since then.
Okay, that is interesting. So, okay, so that is about half the, and would you say that this is the state of affairs? Is this something that's common across the country necessarily, or is Ohio kind of
Other states have
exceptionally
banned.
bad in this regard?
We're exceptionally bad. But a lot of these things have, like, in one way, shape, or form. What happens a lot in Ohio is like we get those cookie cutter bills from ALEC and these other like think tanks out of DC. Now it's Project 2025 is sort of informing a lot of the way these bills are shaped across the country.
Even
Um,
at like the state level, they're kind of pushing in.
Yeah, so we get these bills, and Ohio's just good at making them like really bad, or making them like the worst version possible of these horrible cookie cutter bills. So, we just do it. We just do it to the like fullest extent somehow. We saw that with this DEI anti-DEI bill that passed, and unfortunately, I voted against, of course, as did every Democrat and a couple Republicans even on Wednesday where we even attack unions. We're even going after tenure. We're doing a lot more than even the original like cookie cutter bill did, because we just always like going the extra mile here, I guess, to hurt people in Ohio. So yeah, it's sad. I don't mean to make a joke out of it, but maybe that'll help you remember that. Yeah, we do a lot of the same stuff. We just do it worse or better, depending how you look at it.
I see. I guess it's on one hand, there's dismay in that we are facing such a difficult battle within this state to even achieve what other states in similar economic and political situations are able to pull off, right?
Yeah.
Um, what I have a few other, I suppose, thoughts or questions regarding I mean, what's already been accomplished in the world of clean energy and the future. Thing one, I think a concern that a lot of people have is reliability. So, have you noticed like constituents in Lakewood complaining about reliability necessarily?
Of energy, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think reliability is second on the list, right? Um, affordability is the number one, and the number one by a like a long margin. So one thing that if we want to go back to HB 15, we put in was interruptibility, meaning, and it's something the industries actually want. They want to be able to turn off, have the utility be able to turn off or turn down the power that go to big users so that they can actually avoid doing what are called rolling blackouts. So a lot of times when the power goes off, if it's not a storm, if it's like a heat wave or something, it's because the utility literally turned the power off. They decided, and we had this happen just a couple of years ago, 2 years ago now, 2 summers ago in Columbus, where AEP literally started turning the power off in different neighborhoods so that they could avoid a meltdown of the whole system because there was too much power, too much demand, not enough power to go around, essentially. Interruptibility would allow them to hyper target participating users so that they wouldn't have to like cut off power to poor neighborhoods. And that's what they did. They actually started with poor black neighborhoods. Maybe they didn't intend to, but it's absolutely who they started with. And they just did roll these rolling blackouts. So interruptibility is pretty important. Just grid modernization, so the utilities have more knowledge and control a little bit over how that demand side things work. And then getting more renewable energy on the grid too, and at the distribution level to what we call peak shave, so that you know the grid's built for the highest peak, and to be able to actually bring that peak down so the highest peak is lower, you can focus on other things within the grid to invest in, and we're hoping to do a lot of that peak shaving with renewables through the community program, the community energy program. We're addressing, and all of that also addresses affordability too at the end of the day, because you're investing where investments need to be made, and you're not going to cause utilities to come back to the trough again for another rider or more money heaped on top of their already, I think, high rate uh, here in Ohio. So yeah, I think you can address both. I think we're doing a pretty good job at that. At least um, it's a big step forward, put it that way.
So even in, because if I understand correctly, the renewable energy that's going into Lakewood is coming from many miles away, right? Coming from out of state. So has that had any effects on reliability? I imagine that at first glance it may sound concerning for reliability if that's our
Yeah,
main network there.
yeah, we can kind of get down into like a little bit more how the grid works, but like so you can either buy energy from um here you can kind of call it's called a standard service offer. Utilities go and they do their purchasing through an auction of energy. There's a couple different types of auctions of how they buy it, but um when we go through an aggregator like NOPAC, they're able to choose one generator. So regardless of where you're getting that power from, um, the utility's going out and they're finding the cheapest power from a power plant out in Idaho or a power plant out and actually be PJM. So it'd be like New Jersey or Tennessee or Indiana or Illinois or something. Um, what the aggregator's doing says, no, well, actually, we just want to buy power from this one power plant in Indiana, and it's a solar array. And that's where we want to get it from. We're just going to get it from there instead of going through that auction process. So the power plant, the power that First Energy might buy in this next auction might actually come from that same solar array if it's going to actually provide the energy and the type of energy that it needs. Or it's going to come from the gas or coal plant next door. It just really depends on the market at that moment. And the trick of it is we need to be getting more renewable energy broadly into PJM, this broader network of generators across the region. And so it doesn't really have any extra cost to buy from that power plant in Indiana or that solar array in Indiana. But when you specify that you want to buy from uh, the solar array, you're sending a lot of good market signals that that's the type of energy that this area wants. Please build more of it, right? And the more you build of it, the cheaper it gets. So you're actually bringing the cost. And we talked about that earlier about just bringing more energy on, more local energy that has. So all of that is like within the current system. We're also advocating for a system shift that brings that energy into the distribution utility, so that you can actually be purchasing energy without using that whole transmission system we just kind of talked about. So a lot going on. Utility stuff is complicated, but you seem to be getting a pretty good, you seem to understand it okay. Takes a lot.
We're nearing the end of our podcast, but is there anything else that you want to plug or anything that you really want our listeners to know about?
Man, there's so much. If you're in the state of Ohio or any state, please keep advocating, call your state rep about this is budget time in Ohio. If you're there, if you're listening, call your state rep if you want to protect Medicaid if you want to protect school funding. Those are two things that I think our reps would be good to hear from you about. You know, our food system in the state, and the fact that we are likely, I think there's not too much way around it. We may be heading into an economic time now where we're going to see more poverty. We're going to see more people that are going to be on food stamps or that are food insecure. So making sure that you're advocating to your state rep at the state level specifically, that you protect these programs and protect the people that need help the most, I think is just critically important.
Absolutely. Make your voices heard.
Yep.
Awesome. Well,
That's it.
thank you so much, Representative Rader, for your time, for indulging our questions.
Yeah.
We hope to, stay updated on the bills that you work on, the initiatives that you work towards. We're going to keep an eye on Ohio and particularly Lakewood as well in terms of the services that you advocate for Medicaid, Medicare, hopefully for all, food stamps, as well as clean energy. We're excited to see how it all goes. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I really appreciate what you're doing. So keep up the great work and best of luck in your studies.